Welcome back to the Spiritually Curious Therapist. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, therapist, consciousness guide, and fellow traveler on this path of heart-led healing. Today's conversation is one that speaks directly to every helper, healer, and therapist who has ever asked themselves, what happens when the healer needs healing? My guest, Amy Marohn, shares her extraordinary journey from chronic illness and near death to awakening her intuitive gifts as a spiritual hypnotherapist. Together, we explore how illness, loss, and surrender can become sacred initiations, and why our most powerful tool as helpers isn't another certification or technique. It's our authentic presence. And this is something that just keeps coming back around for me over and over and over again. So, wherever you are, take a deep breath, settle in. And this episode reminds you that your presence is the medicine. Welcome to the Spiritually Curious Therapist, where science, spirit, and the self come together in the art of healing. I'm Jody Silverman, psychotherapist, Reiki master, and fellow seeker. Here we explore how presence, compassion, and nervous system wisdom helps us reconnect with the heart, the body, and the soul. Hello, and welcome back to the Spiritually Curious Therapist. Today I am here with Amy Marohn. So, over a decade ago, Amy became very sick from a mysterious condition of unknown origin, and it took 5 years to get a diagnosis. By that point, she had missed the optimal window of time whereby mainstream interventions could have contained or even completely reversed the illness. Fast forward to a near-death experience that inspired Amy to live more intentionally while simultaneously opening her spiritual pathways to higher frequency realms. The concept of offering spiritual hypnosis as a self-healing modality came through her rather than from her, and with every passing season, enhanced energies and techniques continue to reveal themselves. So Amy helps light workers like ourselves, entrepreneurs and business leaders, release unproductive patterns and recalibrate to the frequency of the authentic self. She offers intensive one-to-one sessions, small group workshops for advanced study, and ongoing coaching. You can also find her new book, Whispers Beyond the Veil, Channel Teachings Inspired by the Spirit World, on Amazon. Amy, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh, thank you, Jody. I really appreciate this wonderful opportunity to connect with your viewers and listeners.
It's going to be so much fun. I am really curious about your story and what you're doing in the world. So tell us a little bit more about who you are, how you got here, and what you're doing now, and how you engage with the community of helpers and healers.
Absolutely. Jody, before I stepped into the work that I'm doing now as a spiritual hypnotherapist, I was working in mainstream rehabilitation field. Much like many of your listeners, I worked in the field at times of mental health,
Mhm.
physical rehabilitation, and also addictions. And the very last job I had in mainstream employment was working in a pain management clinic on a multidisciplinary team of pain psychologists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, Western medicine doctors. We had a naturopath on our team, and we were getting this pain management program up and running. And our main patient or client at that time was injured workers. So I have a long and deep history working with people who have been injured on the job and helping them transition back to life and to what we hope will be fulfilling employment. During that time, Jody, I had experienced what then I just called mystery illness of unknown origin, and some of my symptoms that began becoming progressively worse included chronic pain, chronic fatigue, something that I now know is dysautonomia, which
Mm.
means my entire autonomic nervous system was haywire, and my immune system was badly struggling, meaning I, would have these viruses or infections that were recurrent, and after a while, even resistant to antibiotics. So, I struggled for many years to hold this professional position down, while in the background, secretly, I'm chasing doctors, ironically, even though I'm working as part of a medical system, I'm secretly screwing around trying to find some enlightened being in the Western medicine world that could help me put a name on this
Yeah.
so that maybe we could begin to understand what prognosis and treatment look like. I exhausted all of my local resources and began taking this search on myself. And 5 years in to this health storm, I was able to locate a doctor in Michigan. I'm in Seattle. Long story short, he agreed to see me. He put a name on this condition. It's called myalgic encephalomyelitis. That is a mouthful, for short, slash chronic fatigue syndrome, but it's essentially inflammation of the brain and spinal cord with muscle fatigue. From a scientific or medical biological standpoint, the cells of my body are misshapen and don't produce or carry enough energy.
Mm.
And so one of the underlying themes or challenges of this disorder is post exertional malaise, extreme fatigue. So people like me, we can walk and hike and do the things, but it will take us an extraordinarily long period of time to recover from what would be considered normal activity. So at that point in time, doctor puts a name on it, gives me a diagnosis, and I'm traveling on a monthly basis, 3 to 4 days every month to Michigan for his treatment, to follow his protocol. And at that time, he was using high levels of antiviral medication, and I just simply wasn't responding. So, again, at this point, I'm getting discouraged. My insurance isn't covering a lot of this. I'm deciding I really need to stay away from, or back, probably withdraw from mainstream employment, because toward the 10-month time period, Jody, I was really only able to stay awake 2 hours a day. And the other time I was, bedridden or couch ridden and completely unable to function, even with activities of daily living. So at the 10-month mark, I, tell the doctor in Michigan, tearfully, thank you so much for putting a name on this, for trying this. I'm not getting better. I need to stop treatment. At that point, I let go of my job. I am in utter despair. I've blown through my bank account. I'm now living on credit cards and debt. By the way, I'm navigating a divorce. My elderly mom moves in my house that I purchased 2 years prior. And I have a 9-year-old son who's left in my financial care. And so here I am, throw my hands up in the air. I say, God, take me or heal me. Do not leave me this way. And Jody, like I've said to my clients in my close inner circle, be careful what you wish for, because that seemed to be the somewhat of a magical incantation. Fast forward then, within a month of letting go of everything, I have a near-death experience.
Wow.
My soul leaves my body. My experience is clairsentient. I hear a voice that says to me, Amy, are you ready to leave the earth plane? And within what seems like milliseconds, my emotional body is downloaded the cumulative impact that my early departure from the earth plane would have on my son.
Oh, wow. I just got like
Mm.
complete chills.
It, Jody, it was profound. The heaviness, the despair, the sadness, the confusion, I mean, just anything and everything. You know, if you've lost a loved one, especially unexpectedly, we all know what that, many of us know what that grief and sadness feels like. So in that time span, Jody, even though my physical body was exhausted and ready to leave, spirit, these light beings in the etheric realm had this beautiful way of communicating through thoughts and feelings that perhaps I had a soul contract with my son. And now I know an even, deeper soul contract with my mission and responsibilities here to others. And I made that choice to come back to the earth plane. I knew I wasn't done, there was work to do. And so my body, my soul, is reabsorbed into my physical body. And I'll share I'll share the next steps, but of what happened, because there's this beautiful mediumship unfoldment that
Mm.
happens in the months to follow, leading up to the progression of my, what I call my career calling. But I'll pause for a moment because I know that's a lot. That was a big story about, chronic illness, navigating that, and then leading up to the near death experience.
Yeah, I appreciate the pause. And what was arriving for me as I was listening to you was just this curiosity around what that was like for you
Mm-hmm.
through that period of time when you were not only battling this chronic fatigue and pain and not really fully knowing what it was, and the bouncing around from doctor to doctor to doctor, no one really having an answer because think I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially
Mm-hmm.
now. And I'm seeing a lot of this post-COVID in particularly,
Oh,
where
completely.
yeah, people really are experiencing suffering in a way that I'm not sure has occurred prior.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a very interesting scenario that you shared, Jody, because what's happened with these long COVID symptoms is the medical community is realizing that they parallel this condition, chronic fatigue syndrome and myalgic encephalomyelitis, inflammation of the brain and spinal cord with muscle involvement, brain fog, all of the things, profound fatigue. So in a way, the Western medicine community and even alternative medicine, I think, is more motivated now than ever before to take a look at, what are the medications and protocols. And I've had many of my clients in all different age brackets, even call or email or, come to session to say, hey, one of my doctors is trying a nicotine patch for, have you heard this?
I have heard this. Yeah.
Yes. And look, Jody, I am extraordinarily open-minded about both the intersection of Western and alternative medicine in tackling this, because even through my own journey, one thing I can say, oftentimes with these mystery illnesses, we are our bodies, our immune systems are ahead of science.
Mhm.
And so many doctors just are on the brink of, fully understanding. So what I learned from my journey, Jody, is grace in dealing with Western medicine doctors, and that sometimes we have to play the part of educator and learning how to peel the emotional content out of what you're bringing to them, because that can also be, post COVID, this can be very triggering to the medical community to have people like me come in with the fire hose approach of, I have 9 problems here and I want you to deal with all of them, and they've got 20 minutes. So having a therapist and a sounding board and someone to help you gain some grounding. For me, the beginning of my journey of not knowing filled me with profound despair and depression, because not only did my employer not understand, the doctors didn't understand, my family didn't understand, my friends didn't understand. It's extraordinarily, in the beginning, especially, very, very isolating. Nobody knows what to say. You feel always like you're wearing out your welcome, sharing with, so to speak, and sharing the gravity of what you're navigating. And there's lots of tears behind closed doors. Add in, right, if you work as a therapist or in the rehabilitation field or in Western or alternative medicine, Jody, the expectation is that we don't fall apart,
Right.
that we are, we have this strong exterior, and that we're not human. Somehow we're superhuman, and that we're able to absorb not only whatever our clients or patients bring us, but whatever our own personal life brings us. So this was difficult. In my case, I intuitively knew I needed to step away from mainstream employment, not only because I didn't have the physical capacity to handle the rigors of mainstream employment, but also on the inside, emotionally, I was really beginning to fall apart. I didn't have the sounding board. And, leading up to this, I was actually preparing to die, because for so long I felt horrible. And I thought to myself, how could I feel that I literally, every hour that passed in the day, especially late afternoon into the evening, I felt literally like I was dying. My fevers were kicking up. The pain, the volume on the pain was being turned up. My ability to focus or function or even do simple things or even focus on a television show, or I love to read a book. Things weren't, I wasn't absorbing what I was reading. So there was a very, a cognitive mental component to this.
Yeah.
And so, I find this doctor in Michigan, and even though ultimately his protocol wasn't able to help me or even turn down the volume on my symptoms, there was something very validating or gratifying to just have a name for what this is. The near-death experience changed me. It was much different than most people's near-death experience, in that I wasn't in a hospital. I had spent tons of hours in the ER, even time in the cardiac unit, as the dysautonomia created, irregular heart beats, tachycardia, bradycardia, near syncope, where my body would start to faint, or just drops in my blood pressure and vertigo. That was one of my, and it's still one of my symptoms, but it's far less severe than it was. And so all of these years of going to the hospital and not getting all these random medications pumped into my body, but again, no answers and no long-term treatment solutions, and no, confident doctor in my inner circle that's willing to manage or navigate the complexity of these symptoms. And so my near death experience was at home. I believe in that experience, Jody. I had what other practitioners in the helping healing world have called a soul upgrade. It was
Mm,
not a spontaneous physical healing. My soul wasn't dropped back in my body for my body to say, I'm healed. But it did absolutely blow open the spiritual pathways and create a sort of greater alignment with my authentic self and my soul's path. And so, what I will share from that near death experience, Jody, is that, within weeks of that experience, I was walking down my hallway. And again, clairaudiently, I'm hearing this thought. I just call it the voice that says, Amy, you're going back to school. That was the same voice that I heard in my near death experience.
mm.
And so now, I've crossed this threshold of this communication with the etheric realm. And I knew that that voice wasn't coming from me, it was coming through me. It was now a familiar voice. And I didn't know what that meant. And a few days later, the voice comes through again and says, Amy, you're going back to school to be a hypnotist. And then I knew there was something to this voice, Jody, because I had never seen a hypnotist. I had never known a hypnotist, and never ever in my career path had I randomly Googled, what are the training requirements or what does a hypnotherapist do? I had no idea. And the even crazier part, Jody, is I didn't even question it. I didn't
Mm.
even question it. I knew I had made a choice. The other part of the communication I had left out is, the voice in the near death experience said, Amy, if we send you back, you will live more intentionally. In that moment, I had no idea what that meant. And now, in the days or weeks to follow, it became more and more clear.
Yeah.
So even though I questioned my ability, to have the stamina to move through this relatively short certification program, I registered, I completed it. And February of 2016, I got my certification as a master hypnotist through probably a chintzy looking website, threw out a few ads, and then here we are 10 years later. How my business looked in the beginning and how it looks now is entirely different. We'll talk about that along the way, but I'll pause again, Jody, because I know again that was a lot more layers that I've added.
Yeah, and I am curious about what that looked like in the beginning, given hypnotherapy wasn't something you had ever even
Yeah.
considered or thought about. So once you got the certification, and
Mhm.
then like, did you have this experience of, okay, now what do I do? Or
Yeah.
did it just kind of flow from there?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. A lot of clients and podcast hosts or people I've had deeper conversations with have said, Amy, prior to this near death experience, did you have a connection with spirit? And that's a great question that honestly I hadn't thought of. But I will tell you, as a child, I always felt a deep connection to divine source. I was raised Catholic, 9 years of a Catholic school. Personally, Catholicism didn't necessarily resonate with me, yet I always felt a strong sense of spirit and a voice. And now looking back, as a young child, I wrote music with very, very little formal instruction. Now I know that I was channeling music and the
Mm-hmm.
music was coming through me. And that was this beautiful communication that I had with the spirit realm in not knowing. Melodies and music came through me fluidly. And I always knew as a child, even at 7 or 8 years old, that I I felt a strong calling to help others. And while, the other students in my class were, reading and writing and working on math, I'm having this vision of moving to Africa and opening an orphanage and working with children. And so I felt, even as a child, a strong connection, like a deeper purpose, like I'm here for a reason. I'm just kind of floating through the earth plane randomly, that I was being guided. But then after this experience, this voice definitely, opened up or reopened up inside of me, this deeper awareness that I'm being guided. And the experience of opening my doors essentially to strangers, because by the way, I my clients were coming to my home. I was too sick to travel. I had no idea if I would have the capacity to run like a normal, have a normal schedule. But again, I trusted spirit, and the right people started finding me. And I started out very small and very unsophisticated. I didn't have all the software I have now. I had no idea how to charge people. All I knew was that I was being called to do something, and I was open to whatever form it was going to take. And so it felt very natural to welcome people into my home for a healing experience. And when I started practicing hypnosis, I noticed some organic shifts. First thing I noticed is some higher frequency energies seemed to be moving through me. My body lit up. I would notice that my clients would go into these deeper altered states almost without effort, almost without using the deepeners and all the tools that hypnotists would typically be trained to use. And I also noticed that that voice of spirit whispering to me to work off script. In other words, go here, ask that question. It was like this ongoing dialogue. It was almost like I had this spirit coach walking me through all of these experiences with my clients. And so I then began to realize that, like, hey, this is intuitive work, spiritual work that I'm doing. Drop all of the protocol that I
Mm-hmm.
was trained to do. And by, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years in, I realized that there was a blending of tools being used that went well beyond standard hypnosis into the realm of energy healing, or now what I refer to as trance healing, and coaching,
Mm-hmm.
spiritual coaching, and metaphysics. And so, anyway, we can talk a little bit further through our conversation about this unfoldment, because I find that a lot of therapists and a lot of people who work in the helping healing world have their own form of spiritual awakening and experience their own form of, I'll just call it generically, unfoldment as helper healers.
Yeah, I think that's very common, especially for helpers and healers who are seekers themselves.
Mhm,
I think we are naturally curious and open, and in our training and the work that we do,
mhm,
we are taught to practice presence and to enter into the therapeutic relationship in this relational open way, which requires a certain level of attunement.
mhm.
In order to do that, you have to be open to greater consciousness. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of parallels. Um, I'm wondering, I have a couple things are showing up for me. I guess the first question is, prior to this, you were already doing helper healer work in
Mhm,
the area of
mhm.
rehabilitation.
Uh-huh.
And what I'm curious about is how how do you see the work you're doing now
Mhm,
after having had your near-death experience
mhm.
different than the work you did then? Not like functionally. I mean, obviously you're doing different work, but
Sure.
in terms of helping and in terms of helping and creating an environment for people to heal. What
Mhm,
what's different for you?
mhm, mhm. Oh, everything. I had to throw out almost the textbook approach to everything.
Mm,
I felt like, in retrospect, looking back at my role, it helper healer, titles don't matter, right? Light worker, helper healer, it's a frequency thing.
mm,
And so, I mean, the thing that is similar is I showed up with the same amount of love and compassion, but back then I was very limited within the confines of conventional thinking, right? So there's a lot of documentation, a lot of paper pushing, a lot of, creative problem solving, but again, all within the confines of the Western medicine model. You couldn't ever in those environments talk about spirituality. And so, I mean, there was a complete paradigm shift in the sense of I began to understand that my job in this role is more of a coach or a guide in helping my clients discover their truth. I believe the answers lie within,
mhm,
right? Back in my old persona, it was like, you come with a problem, I have the solution. And now I'm here and I'm like, I always say to my clients, the most powerful healer of all is not me, it's you,
mhm,
right? So my job, I believe, is to help my clients dust off their soul. Who are they beneath the trauma and life experiences and the chaos, right, of their life, and to dust off their wings. And I'm smiling as I say that, Jody, because most of the people who seek out the work that I do, because it's spiritual hypnotherapy. We're going to talk about the difference, if we have time, between mainstream hypnosis and spiritual hypnosis. Most people who find me have strong spiritual leanings.
mhm,
The other piece is I espouse the concept that my clients or my students are the experts in their own healing journey, right? And no two people will require the same tools or the same process, right? And so logic stands to follow. No two people, our wiring is different, our life story is different, our core values are different, our desired outcomes look different. And so there's a high degree of customization in what I do. I work much more intuitively. I'm much more interested in helping my clients ignite the healer within themselves than proclaiming to have the best tools and techniques to get them from where they are to where they want to be. So in my space, we're building a foundation. I can't promise my clients they'll never be triggered. That's not realistic.
right.
But through the deep spiritual work we do, together. In other words, I'm helping them look through a more spiritual lens to understand who they are as a soul. The easier it is for them to navigate, right? The, unexpected events of life, right? And it shortens the amount of time that they have, the recovery time, if you will, for them to be able to, be more buoyant, right, in their emotional presentation as they're navigating hardships, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It speaks to psychological, emotional, spiritual, physical flexibility and the
Yeah.
ability, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
the nervous system regulation, which is not about being calm and centered all the time. It's about the ability to meet whatever
Yeah.
stressors can enter your field.
100%.
I'm wondering, as I'm listening to you, how did this paradigm shift help you with your own healing?
Yeah. That's a great question. Well, and so, in all of us, people who work in the field of counseling or therapy, whatever your background is, wherever you studied, it's wonderful. It gives us a language, it gives us a framework for understanding a lot, right? But I always say healing beyond the mind into soul level healing. And I think when we are living in alignment, when we're living most authentically through our work, not only are we spurring on in others the ability to heal themselves, but something very magical and mystical shifts within ourselves. And it's implicit permission for us to heal along with our patients or clients. The other piece of it is the more we work intuitively, right, the more spirit moves through in shifting our mindset and bringing forth tools and practices that help us deactivate the primitive mind, right, the part of our mind that's in fight or flight, the shoulda, woulda, coulda, the waiting for the other shoe to drop, while at the same time activating the higher mind. That's the infinitely wise part of us that actually knows how to manage, are these symptoms or these outer world triggers, right, that used to unground us, right? And so for me, I am saying that, I did start to take energy healing classes because I wanted to broaden my understanding of energy healing and how it works. And, work with people who've been working in that field for 20 or 30 years, just to get some insight and further education. I did go back to school to study mediumship on a deeper level, taking classes and workshops that would expand the repertoire of tools and understanding. I actually did go back and get another degree in metaphysics because I wanted to know what tools are they using. I wanted to understand more about metaphysics and spiritual philosophy. See, here's the thing, Jody. You and I can take, classes and certifications and work with some of the highest esteemed, most credentialed, therapists and healers around the globe. And I commend people for that. It's amazing. But where spirit comes in, I say in my book, let spirit be the final authority.
Mm.
Okay, because our role as helper healers is to take all of this learning and mold it into something that's authentic to us, right? And this can only be done through a dialogue between, and I purposely use spirit in a generic form, Jody. For some people, spirit means, higher self or divine mind. For other people, it's God or Buddha or, nature or spirit guides and ancestors, whatever it is for you, but allowing spirit, whomever, whatever that is for you, to be the final authority in guiding you to pull together this massive amount of knowledge, right? And mold it into something that's very unique to your soul's energy and your soul's frequency. Okay, so for me, I've used all of these tools, and, you know, for me, sitting with spirit, sitting with my spirit guides daily, and simply, asking them, please come closer. What is it you would like me to know? And these open ended, meditations, that we can use on a daily basis to see again what comes through, not from, what comes through you in this day. Right now, we're talking about all the clairs, clairaudient, being able to hear spirit, clairsentient, being able to feel spirit in energies or emotions, clairvoyance, being able to see visions or memories or images or symbols that have some deeper meaning. Okay, so this is how I've been able to turn down the volume on the chronic fatigue and the physical pain, because now I've learned to create space for spirit to come through in whatever form spirit is inspired to communicate with me.
Yeah, you bring up some really interesting points, and I'm I'm feeling guided to circle back for a moment because I think it's
Mhm.
really important. This the piece about as helpers, healers, therapists, we tend to, speaking for myself, and this message has been coming through to me quite a bit recently. We tend to run from certification to certification.
Yeah.
What new tool,
Oh,
what new technique, and I need to learn this, and I need to go to this training, and then you end up with this like toolbox of all these techniques, and then it just becomes overwhelming because you're not sure what to use when. Speaking
yeah.
speaking for myself. And what I'm hearing you say is that at the end, while all of those things are lovely and important, and if you're interested in it, certainly learn as much as you can or want to about it. But at the end
Mhm.
of the day,
Mhm.
it is our authentic presence that really matters, and
Yes.
to cultivate the if you're going to put your energy somewhere, putting
Mhm.
it towards the cultivation of that authentic vibration or frequency so that your
Mhm.
channel can be clear and you can
Yes.
be fully present is what's most important. And did I hear
Oh,
that right?
yes. Jody, so beautifully articulated and spot on. And, this is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because as people who work in the field of, helping healing, light workers, whomever, however whatever your identifier is, it's the frequency that we carry that is it's the work we do on ourselves that radiates outward into our work, right? And so if we want to be more effective as helper healers, it behooves us to take a look at ourselves, right? And begin to see ourselves through a more spiritual lens, right?
Mm.
Who am I as a soul? What is my mission as a soul? And to look at family patterns and to look at recurrent patterns in our own lives that have been ungrounding. It was funny, Jody, and again, that was so articulate, you articulated that beautifully. One of my spirit guides said, Amy, replace the need for perfection and just simply be present. Just our presence is here. We don't have to have all the answers. We just have to have presence, and we have to be able to open up our spiritual ear, right? To even hear what our clients or our patients aren't saying, right? And to intuitively connect with them, energetically connect with them, because there's a wealth of wisdom and knowledge in that that goes well beyond the confines of theory and textbook and tools, right? So just being present is such a key foundational practice as therapists.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, 100%. And the more tools and interventions we reach for, sometimes that takes us out of that presence and away from our true authentic selves, especially if it's something that doesn't feel quite right for us. Because they always, and the
Mhm.
research shows, what if you're asking the question of like, what's the best intervention? The answer
Mhm.
is the one that the therapist believes the most in.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
what's going to work the best.
Mhm.
So I'm aware that we are almost at time. And so but before we wrap, I just wanted to know, in terms of the work that you do, and you do a lot of work with helpers, healers, and therapists, in terms of helping them find their authentic selves, exactly what we're talking about here. And so
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you want to spend like a minute or two just describing that work so that folks know what you do, and if they're interested in doing the work, how they can reach you.
Sure, absolutely. But best way for people to reach me is through my website. It's sensoriumhypnosis.com. Sensorium means senses, Sensorium, sensoriumhypnosis.com. That website is pretty all encompassing. If you scroll to the very bottom, it will connect you with my YouTube channel and social media accounts where you can watch videos and, lots of mind expanding materials on social media outlets. Also, you can find my book there, which will connect you to Amazon. And that's I've got all these little stickies in here
I
because
love it.
it's a spiritual curriculum, by the way, with journal prompts. And it's Whispers Beyond the Veil, channel teachings inspired by the spirit world. I really encourage therapists to read this because it is a spiritual curriculum that helps us connect with the most authentic version of ourselves, but also with higher realms, with spirit. And so it's a wonderful process there. If people want to do independent study, if people are interested in connecting with me as a spiritual hypnotist, and I say for soul healing, they can also do that from my website. It's a free consultation because I want to learn more about the people who are reaching out to me,
Yeah,
and what their presenting issues are, what their goals are, and we can talk about how do we customize things and create a program that resonates best with your soul.
I love that. And I've ordered your book, and I'm really looking forward to
Oh,
diving in. So I'm really
thank
excited
you.
for that.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your wonderful platform and all the great work you do. Very inspiring.
Thank you. And I appreciate you for being here and for sharing yourself and for sharing the work that you're doing. And it's so necessary and needed. And, for all of us as helpers and healers, having people that we can turn to support us in our own healing and spiritual journey is just so important. So thank you for your work. It was
Thank you,
lovely
Jody.
talking with you.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it.